Welcome back to episode 104 of Teachers in Transition, the podcast and the YouTube channel. My name is Kitty Boitnott. I am the owner and founder of both Boitnott Coaching and Teachers in Transition. If you have listened to this podcast or watched this YouTube channel in the past, you know that I alternate topics each week. One week I talk about career transition for teachers because I am a trained and experienced, heart-centered career transition and job search coach to teachers who are ready to leave the classroom and want to find something else to do with their careers. I'm also a certified stress management coach. And so on alternating weeks, I talk about stress management strategies, specifically with teachers in mind. This week, I am offering stress management, and I'm taking one of the topics from a recent webinar presentation that I posted as an evergreen presentation that you can have access to if you'd like to learn about 6 other strategies for managing your stress during the final weeks and months of a typical school year. Not that there's been anything particularly typical about the last 2 springs, last year certainly, with everybody shutting down and scrambling to figure out what to do. Nothing about last year's spring for teachers was typical, and this year's not much better, maybe just a little bit. But it's still stressful. Even if COVID weren't an issue, the end of the year, the months from March to May to June are typically full of stress-related issues for teachers, whether it's all of the testing that has to be done or the concern about getting your kids ready for the test, or all of the meetings that your administrators require you to attend, or whatever. It's just a stressful time of year. And I want to offer some tips, thoughts, strategies about how you might not necessarily eliminate that stress during this time of year, but to manage it, mitigate it, proactively address it so that it doesn't wind up making you sick. Now, I've talked about this in previous episodes in Teachers in Transition, and you can find those listed. But today I'm going to be, I've talked about creating the mindset that you need to get through the last few months of school. I also talked in the episode before last about the importance of practicing healthy habits, keeping yourself well by practicing good health habits, drinking enough water and eating well and getting the sleep you need and all of that. But all of that's just part of what you need to do. And this week I want to talk about the importance of your taking control of your work environment. And that is going to sound a lot easier to say than it is to actually do. Because what I know from my own experience is that many teachers, too many teachers, are dealing in environments that feel toxic, that are unhealthy, perhaps physically as well as mentally and emotionally, but there's just a lot going on that is creating a toxic environment that is hard on teachers. And by this time of year, it has a cumulative effect. It begins to really take a toll. So I want to offer some suggestions for how you can at least make an effort to address the toxic. If you're working in a toxic environment, if you aren't, glory be, say a little prayer of thank you for not being in this kind of environment. But many of the teachers that I talk to on a regular basis describe a toxic environment. one where they don't feel supported by their colleagues or their administration. They are under constant scrutiny. They feel like nothing that they do is good enough. They are surrounded by whiners and complainers, and it begins to build up and take a toll. So one of my recommendations for how to deal with working in an environment that feels unhealthy, that may have a toxic effect on your mood, your attitude, your sense of self, is to try to find someone on your staff, on the faculty, who approaches things in a similar way that you do. Find a like-minded colleague. Now, you might have to search a little bit, and especially if you're relatively new to the building, it may be harder to do this than it sounds. You may have already found someone. But I've been in a lot of different buildings over the years, and finding that person or that small group of people that you are in sync with and you can share your feelings with without judgment and without fear of them telling on you or tattling is a tricky business. There was an occasion when I was new to a building, and honestly, for the very whole year of my first year in that building, I had this sense of I didn't know who I could trust. I had decided that perhaps my principal was not someone that I could count on, but I didn't know if I was the only one who felt that way. And so I was very careful not to share with anyone. I would go home. I was married at the time, so I would go home and tell my husband about what was going on and so get his take on my perception of what was going on. But I didn't have anybody at school that I could feel reliably comfortable talking to. And it wasn't until the very end of the school year, like 2 weeks before the end of the year, that someone said something to me that made me think, this person has some insights that I could certainly benefit from. And suddenly I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. So if you can find someone like that, find someone who is a positive thinker, who has a positive outlook, who can make you laugh about whatever's, even in the worst of circumstances, if you can find something to laugh at, then you might feel a little bit better. In the event that you feel like you're being singled out or overly scrutinized, if the principal's in your classroom every day or every other day, observing, making notes, finding things to criticize and critique, you might want to start documenting. This is another way to take control of your environment. You don't have to feel like a victim, so you can start to document anything that feels off. If you feel like you're being selected out of everybody, if the principal is managing to get in on everybody once a day or several times a week, and you're not the only one who's being scrutinized, then you don't need to be too paranoid about it. But if you do get the sense that you're suddenly being put under the microscope and that you're being scrutinized more than normal, then document anything that might feel off to you, so that if it comes to the principal moving for putting you on a plan of administrative assistance or whatever it is that he or she might have in store for you, that you're not caught completely without some sort of defense. So document anything that doesn't feel right. You need to also consider that not everything that happens in the building is about you. So don't take as an affront everything that happens, because it may not have anything to do with you. It goes back to, I've offered in past episodes the recommendation that you read the book, The 4 Agreements. One of the 4 agreements is to not take anything personally. So even if it feels personal, know that it probably isn't until you know for sure that it is. And then be prepared to be assertive in your defense of yourself without being overly aggressive or defensive. And it's a tough thing to do. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice, but it's a skill that you need to develop. Be assertive, stand up for yourself, but don't be aggressive or overly defensive, whether you're defending yourself or your practice in your classroom or even your students. You want to, if your principal is giving you a tough time and you feel like you need to stand up for yourself, that you haven't done anything wrong, you need to be willing to stick to your guns. But you also want to keep your options open. So you don't want to burn any bridges. You don't want to say anything that you might be sorry for later. You want to keep things in perspective. All of this is part of taking control of your work environment. So sticking up for yourself, but keeping your options open. You want to avoid the drama that may be going on in the building that may or may not have anything to do, probably doesn't have anything to do with you. Don't get drawn into it. Steer clear. You don't need to take on someone else's battle. So if you have a friend who's having an issue and the principal's coming down on them, you can be supportive of your friend, but you don't need to get drawn into the drama. And finally, stay clear of the gossip mongers in your building. You know who I'm talking about. Every building has them. Stay out of just a good rule of thumb, whether you're in your first year of teaching or your 30th year of teaching, stay out of the teacher's lounge. That's where you will hear all the grumbling, the griping, the criticism of everybody and everything. You'll hear the gossip, and if you love gossip, that's the place to be. But trust me, you'll be better off in the long run if you don't know what the gossip is. Do your job. Stay clear of the drama. Don't hang out with the grumblers and the gripers. That is a good way for you to manage the work environment that can all too easily become toxic and unhealthy for you. So that's it on that topic for today. If you have any questions or comments, certainly feel free to share them. Please review this podcast so other people can find it more easily. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please email me at kittyboitnott@gmail.com. I will offer the link to the stress management webinar presentation that I referenced earlier in the conversation today. And if you have any thoughts or recommendations that you'd like for me to share with others about how to control a toxic work environment, maybe something that you've tried in the past that worked for you, let me know. And and I'll be happy to share. That's it for this week. As always, stay well, stay safe, be kind to one another, wear a mask, whether you've been vaccinated or not, in public until we get this crazy pandemic completely behind us. We see light at the end of the tunnel, but it is not behind us yet. And I'll see you again next week. Thanks for now.